Hey, we about to move to a segment called Football 101,
All
which
right.
this week we're gonna do the defensive side of the field again because the first week was Jason Williams where he did linebackers. Last week Jay did receivers, and this week Plank is going to do uh, defensive formations. Plank was Plank. Why don't you start off by giving us an introduction as far as tell us where you played high school football at and where you played college football at?
Absolutely. So I actually started out in the Park District in Pop
Okay.
Warner at Ogden Park in South
Mm.
Side of Chicago. We had quite a few greats there. Lim Bloom was where I matriculated to high school, and we played there. Actually, we played in city championship game. First time for Lim Bloom in quite a while. And then I played 1 year at Triton Junior College. That was, my college experience, basically because at 155 pounds, you weren't going to necessarily play a whole lot of football. So I wasn't the massive guy that I am now, but I'm glad to talk about this segment. This
Okay.
segment.
But that dude can hit like a wildcat.
So what we about to do, Plank, is we about to have this defensive backs versus wide receivers.
Bring it.
Yeah,
Bring it. Come on,
yeah,
Jay.
because
Hey,
I know
hey, ain't
Jay
nothing but a
Jay
thing.
broke down that route tree last week, and we know
Right.
offensively, we like to dominate you defensive guys. So what you would like to start off with a line formation? So it's all yours, Plank.
All right. We got that PowerPoint, that Bears banner that I actually created. Let me know if you can see this. It should say Bears banner football 101.
Yes, hold on, let me bring it in.
Okay.
I see it.
There we go.
All right. So let's kind of start, visually breaking down what we are talking about on some of these concepts. First thing, let's kind of talk about a defense. It all comes down to math. So everything that we're talking about is math based. So when we're talking about a 3-4 defense, that basically means you see these three guys in blue. These are the defensive linemen. So you got a nose guard and defensive tackles on either side, and the four linebackers. So those linebackers are denoted in green. Strangely enough, this 3-4 defense is fundamentally no different than the old Oklahoma 52. You're playing the exact same construct. We just changed naming conventions for whatever reason.
That's
And
old
at,
school.
at this point, we've got on the back of the defense, this is your defensive backfield. So your cornerback, free safety, and strong safety. And that actually breaks out the basic defensive formation of a 3-4. All right, let's change it a little bit. So now we got a 4-3 defense. So basically, all of this always comes down to math. So when we're talking about 4, that's these down defensive linemen. So you got the defensive end, 2 defensive tackles, and an end on the other side. And then you've got 3 linebackers. The 3 linebackers, a lot of times when we start talking about naming conventions and nomenclature, we come up with different acronyms to call them. It really doesn't disguise it for anybody, but over the years, it made it that much easier to identify it. So the M is a middle linebacker. That's what most defensive call a Mike. So if you start hearing quarterbacks out there saying, Mike, 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 they're trying to identify where that middle linebacker is so that their offensive linemen have the ability to pick up the blocking schemes. This guy over here, the S, that's the strong side linebacker. And what they generally call him is the Sam. So Sam, anytime you start hearing references to Sam, that's a strong side linebacker. And then you've got the W, which is the weak side linebacker. We denote him as the Will. So when we're talking about defensive 4-3, or what have you, these are the basic formations and constructs of the defensive lineman in front and how many linebackers are behind them. Generally, you need those 4 defensive backs to kind of make sure that your defense is solvent. But that the basic schemes of the defense are defensive linemen and linebackers. So you can have a 2-6 or 1-7. That would be pretty crazy, but it could be something that you could actually support. So let's continue on a little bit, and let's talk about the next iteration. So now we start talking about coverage. When we talk about coverage, this is basically how is the defense going to respond to all of the wide receivers that came out. So when Jay was talking last week, he was talking about things like a route tree and where the wide receivers have the ability of going. I said before, all of this is based on math. So think about it. If we're talking about things that are based on math, there's a such thing as a cover one. Cover one or cover zero, they basically mean this is going to be a man-to-man. So wherever the man in front of you goes, you have to go. So think about it. If that receiver, if Jay's out there and I'm man-to-man on him, and he runs 30 yards down the field, I've got to run 30 yards down the field to keep up with him. So what's going to happen? Probably I'll get tired. Eventually, it's extremely hard trying to keep up with somebody as fast and shifty and elusive as Jay. So that's already putting me at a detriment. So what you want to do is start developing zone defenses instead of having to run 30 yards to keep him. I might run 4 yards and wait for him to get to me. So I'm like, okay, so by the time Jay comes there, I'm already sitting there waiting like, yeah, I can't wait for him to get here. That's probably a better way of doing that. But, the most important thing is we try to disguise what we're doing. So when we start talking about things like 4-3 defense, cover 2, the coverage is basically how many people you have that are protecting your back zone. So let's go into talking about that wide receiver route tree. So this was where Jay talked about this last week. And as a matter of fact, I learned so much new about this. It was really great. I'm always going to have hats off to you, Jay, but right now you're taking a loss today, buddy.
Lay in the wood.
So what we can see if we're actually looking at this route tree, we see all these different routes that the receivers are running. One, you're seeing a receiver running a flat. Another, you're seeing him running this number 4 curl or the out or whatever. All of these, if I'm trying to keep up with this guy as a man-to-man, that is a nightmare. And that's a nightmare if it's a guy that's slow with little skills. Somebody that's actually skilled that makes every route look the same, it's going to be extremely difficult to keep up with him. So in that case, what we end up doing is going into what's called a zone defense. So let's spend a little time talking about the coverages. And I only got 2 more slides left, but I want to make sure we can get into this. So at the very least, the people that are watching the game have a better idea of what they're actually looking for. So when we start talking about cover 2, the coverage dictates the number of deep defenders. So if we've got a cover 2, what that means is we've got 2 guys back there that are split the field in half, and they're responsible for anything deep within that field. If we got cover 3, there's going to be 3 guys that are splitting the coverage in the third. There's also a cover 4, cover 5, what have you. Those get into what's called like prevent defenses. I don't like prevent defenses because they prevent you from winning the game, but it gives you a kind of an idea of what we're talking about here. So how cover 2 actually correlates to that wide receiver route tree. This guy, the 2 safeties or corners, it can be either way, are responsible for anything deep. So at the bottom here, you got your linebackers. In some cases, they've got corners or safeties that are playing a part here. They're responsible for the underneath zone. So when we're talking about a cover 2, a traditional cover 2, we've got 2 safeties deep, responsible for anything that's going deep, and 5 underneath zones. So when you see somebody score a 40-yard touchdown bomb, that's always on those deep people.
Okay.
Now, there's a variation of that. So those of us that are Chicago Bears fans, that's all of us. We remember this thing that Lovie Smith brought called a Tampa 2. So they had a different variation of that cover 2. What their variation was, they still had those 2 deep safeties, but this middle curl zone, you use Brian Urlacher, and because he was an extremely athletic linebacker, he had the ability of dropping very deep into that zone, almost as far as the safeties would. So you started getting people like, Brian Urlacher, or that, I can't remember the linebacker name from Tampa, number 55.
Derek Brooks.
Derek Brooks.
Derek Brooks. So he was another guy that was athletic. So he traditionally played safety. And as he got older and bigger and stronger, he still had kept his same safety skills. So they were able to push him back a little bit further into the middle of the field, and it made it that much more difficult to complete a pass against them. So,
Hey, Mike, I have a question.
Oh, what we got?
Yeah.
Woo!
Okay. So I'm looking at Jay's route tree, right?
Yep.
Okay. I don't remember all the numbers, but I'm looking at that zone that you showed. Let me bring that back on the screen. The zone. Okay, there's the route tree. Let me see if I can see that. Hold on, make it a little big because I can't really see that.
Okay.
So I've got a 7, a 5, and a 3. Let's go there. So
Corner, out, come back. Okay.
Right. So I'm going to put 3. I'm gonna motion my guy and put 3 guys on that side of the field.
Okay.
Okay. And I realize you're running that zone that you just seen. So I'm gonna run one guy deep on that 7 route.
Yep.
To try to get your corner, and between your corner and the safety, hoping that between the two of them, they're gonna cover that 7 route. Then I may run one of those guys on that 3 route, right? Because that's the one I'm probably gonna hit.
Okay. That's a great idea.
Okay.
So that
Let's go.
That 7 route is always going to be the responsibility of that deep safety. So whoever's got that deep zone. So all he has to do is wait and see and watch what comes to him. That's the great thing about a zone defense. As far as the guy that's running that comeback, you've already got these 5 underneath zones with people out there waiting for nothing to do. So what if they end up throwing 2 guys into that same zone? I ended up being, I told you it comes down to math, right? I'm 3 yards away from one receiver and 4 yards away from the other receiver. Okay, he makes the catch. I'm comfortable making that tackle, making sure he doesn't get any yards after the catch, and that's a minimum gain from their perspective. So,
you remember back in the 90s, one of the college teams that were famous at doing that, what I just said was Florida, where Shane Matthews was the quarterback.
Well, he couldn't throw with 7 yards.
He could throw with 7 yards.
Right.
But you remember in the national championship game, the D-back finally at the end of the game set on that route. And when he tried to go to that underneath route, he faked like he was going to cover because all game long they kept biting on it. They kept biting on the 7 route, and the corner kept going, and him and the safety was covering the same guy. At the end of the game, he finally said, "This is not about to happen again." And he sat on that route and came and picked it off.
That's a good gamble because if you think about it, from that zone defense, he already had the safety over the top. So even if he played it or whatever, there's another guy defending you, and he got a pick 6, and that made the difference in the game. That actually reminds me of one of the things that happened in the game that we were playing in Soldier Field when I was in high school playing for Lindblom, and we had a player that was hurt. So the defense, we were really killing the offense we were playing against, and our player was hurt. And I'm looking at the ref, and I said, "Timeout, ref, timeout, ref." And he said, "Well, why do you guys need a timeout?" I said, "We only got 10 guys on the field." And he looked at me and said, "That's all y'all need." So, I was like, okay. So the refs are fans as well. So that's a great point. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Any y'all got any questions on this before next slide? Okay.
I do. Keith, let me ask you a question. Like when I see zone defenses, I look at how like the cornerbacks line up. Now, why is it that a lot of times when I see zone defenses that the cornerbacks are sort of turned instead of facing the guy, they're usually turned into like almost like the line of scrimmage?
Right, because they're trying to get back and cover that zone, and they're turning their body in such a way they can see the whole field, and they're trying to see who may be coming from the other side of the field that enters that zone. So think about it. You got 2 deep safeties that are responsible for everything deep on splitting half of the field, and you also have the people that are in the under coverages that are responsible for anybody that enters there. You can't leave there until the play's over. So if I'm in the under coverage and I'm responsible for the flat or for the curl, I'm sitting up there waiting for somebody to come into that flat or the curl. That's what the best and most disciplined defenses do. A lot of defenses get lazy, and 2 or 3 seconds in, they're like, "Oh, nobody's here. Let me run around here." Then all of a sudden, you see a running back just runs out to the flat, gets a 2-yard catch, and runs it and turns it into a first down. That's what you have an undisciplined defense.
Yeah. And that's what makes football so beautiful, because I always said it was like 13 different types of games being played, chess matches. You got 11 players, you got the coaches, and you got the clock. And a lot of times when you're dealing with like this, the corners, like for example, they're in the zone. A lot of times their onus is like, especially when they're like leaned in towards the line of scrimmage, when they're sticking the guy. A lot of times what they're trying to do is, of course, use the sideline as that extra man, but they're trying to force their receiver towards the middle to the help.
You're absolutely correct. So, this is, again, chess versus checkers. We're trying to outsmart what the other guy is throwing together. And, you got any number of other defenses that you can throw if you got a receiver that's got great physical skills and he's the only one that's really a threat, you might try to put him in a box and one. So that's basically like putting them on Revis Island. No matter where that receiver goes, I'm going to put my best defender against him, and I'm going to put that defender in a man-to-man against that receiver. And at the same time, I have the benefit of those secondary zone players being able to help us out.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if y'all happen to play Madden, I'm going to tell you something. If you got a defense with that team, don't switch to another one, because you might be the Bears and play with the Eagles defense and your corners suck and you playing man-to-man and you finding a water boy like 30 yards open. That was a joke, but it's real, though. I mean, the personnel fits the actual defense.
I agree with you.
Hey, Jay, I got one question before you go, and I want to pick Jay brain on this.
Ooh.
When Plank just said
receiver versus DB again. Come on, Jay, what you got?
Okay. Jay, as far as what Plank just said, and he said defensive playing zones, can you explain when they said a receiver sat down in the zone, or he sat down like in the open part of the zone? What does that mean as far as from your point of view? What does that mean?
So a lot of times when you come up against a defense and they're playing in a zone, what you want to do is you want to find an open spot. That's what you want to do. You want to find an open spot. So if you just say if they're playing in a cover 2 and your route requires you, regardless, we'll just use a hook route. What you want to do is find the soft spot. And I know y'all hear that all the time when the commentators say, he found a soft spot in the zone. So what you want to do is you want to find a spot in between the safety and the corner, or if it's in the middle of the field, you want to find that soft zone between the linebackers and the safeties. And that way, it's an opening. I mean, if you look at it, sometimes it'd be so pretty because you'd be like, oh, the quarterback can't miss this because it's an opening. It's right there. It's a soft spot. And a lot of times, when you make that reception, you either gonna make the reception, move the chains, or like I said last week, if you make the reception, break a tackle, got some yak. So it just really so that's what they mean. So when they talk about in the zone, it's just finding this soft spot, basically where there's not a defender.
Okay. Hey, Tammy, did you have any questions before Keith move over to the next slide?
No, you can keep going.
Okay.
I'm going to get Tammy on this next one because we're going to have a math exercise.
Okay.
So we know she's good in math. All right, so next to the last slide, we're talking about defensive formation 4-3. Remember, I said 4-3 deals with those first 2 numbers are dealing with the defensive linemen and the linebackers. So anytime you hear that it called out like they're 52, 4-3, 31, whatever, that's letting you know where your linemen are going and where your linebackers are going. Then when we put the coverage in there, cover 2, cover 3, this is letting you know how we're doing pass defense, exactly how we're going to fan out the field when we're trying to protect against the pass. So let's get into this last slide here. This is a cover 3. when we start talking about a cover 3, what we got is 3 defensive blacks, or in some cases it's a linebacker that are filling these 3 outside zones. So when we start talking about it from a mathematical perspective, Tammy, this is to you, right? We've got 11 people on the team, on the field. If we're in a cover 2, how many do we have that are on the underneath zone?
What?
If we've got a cover 2 defense, right? How many players do we have in the underneath zone?
And the underneath zone is that back part?
This is this bottom part.
Bottom part.
So 11 divided by 4. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, I'm gonna help you out a little bit.
You're close.
Okay,
yep.
That's very good.
That's actually,
okay?
Yep, it is.
So if we're in a cover 3, that means 3 in the back. We already have the 4 defensive linemen. That's gonna show us with 5 in the under zone. If we're doing with 4 in the under zone. If we're doing a cover 2, that guy from the deep middle comes down here and he protects that underneath zone. So cover 2 means you got the deep halves split in half, and then you've got 5 underneath zones. So what happens if we do let's just throw this out, Tammy, God, Jay. What if we do a cover 4?
If you
Then how many
4,
people do we have?
Don't do it.
3 under.
Boom!
It's called a
It comes down to math. But what
to me, it's called a prevent defense, and it don't work.
It don't work.
It sure don't. It sure don't.
So I want to leave with this. A lot of times teams come up with this different nomenclature. We got a MAC. We're doing a coverage back. That's just naming conventions for that team. You can put a cat in the oven, that don't make it a biscuit, right? So,
right.
So whatever they call
it, you just got a cat.
So that actually gives you an idea, and this is just basic defensive formations. There's going to be any number of variations, but as I started out with, the 52 defense from Oklahoma in the 1950s is the exact same thing as the 3.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
And then there's that vaunted defense that we used to carry for years, the 4-6 defense.
Well, that's a whole
well, strangely enough, though, the 4-6 defense was not named after the number of players. It was named, as a matter of fact, hey,
that's how you got your name. Send it folks to the emergency room.
There you go.
But you know what? One thing I can say about the 46 defense, though, it worked back then. Guess what? It won't work now.
It worked back then until they played against who? Dan Marino,
Everybody but Dan Marino, and he did that 2-step drop and
what did he do? He started exploiting quick passes and then exposed the 4-6 defense. You're right.
You got Plank on that weak side out there sneaking up on the line, bouncing in. You got your fast linebacker on the outside, coming on the outside. You got your covered guy in the middle. You got your other guy to rush the block guy in the middle. And the way it was, you see all these people coming, you go 1, 2, 3, it's too late. But he was doing them 2-step drops, and I was like, man, Les Frazier was like, will y'all please shoot this dude?
Wait a minute.
because football has evolved. Right.
Man, guy.
I graduated from Lindblom.
I'm sorry. Right. Go ahead, Jay.
I'm just saying because the passing game has evolved so much in the NFL right now. The 46 defense, it wouldn't work today. And it was a couple of teams that tried to run it a couple of years ago. They were showing variations of the 46 defense, but because how the passing game in the NFL has evolved right now, it won't work.
Well,
it just won't work. And not only that,
Jay, it won't work as your base defense. You're
sure
right,
won't.
because we know how to beat it. But you can switch if you can switch up and catch them at the right time.
Right.
That's why it's a game.
I agree with that.
Right?
Like you do, you run a couple. You go on a 4-6 and run a couple fake blitzes. You do it about 3 or 4 times. Then towards the end of the game, they're like, "Oh, they've been stacking this up. They wait for it, don't come." And when they don't, then here they come. But like you said, Jay, because the way the offense is a lot more intricate as far as as far as what they do now, it's really hard, man.
Yeah.
Except for us, they can run the 4-6 on our offense.
Hey, we're gonna wrap up the broadcast in about a minute and a half. Frank, that was a very good presentation.
All right.
And, you know, one of the things I was thinking about, you was looking at the zones to help people out understand zones when they run zones. That sometimes teams run a zone on one side of the field and run man coverage on the other side of the field. And this is one of the reasons why a quarterback sometimes take a guy, put him in motion, and halfway through him going in motion, he sends him back to see if the guy covering him moves. Now, defenses are smart, right? Let's say in a situation where you got half the field. If you send him back, that guy went half the field and went back. Smart quarterbacks like Brady and Aaron Rodgers send you in motion again and send you all the way across the field. Now, if it was like half zone and half man-to-man, that guy doesn't go all the way across the field. He goes back to his side of the field. Now they realize half the field is in zone and the other half is in man. And so what teams do, like the Patriots, is they run that drag route right underneath. They clear that zone out by sending those guys deep, and they run a drag route, which Jay showed on that tree, which is just a route where you start on one side of the field and drag all the way across for 3 or 4 yards, and that's why you see those guys and there's nobody there. And he catch that ball, there's nobody. Hey, what you about to say, Jay?
If Nagy was smart this week, he would use a lot of motion. He would use a lot of motion because watching the Rams last week, kind of what you said, Bernard, where they playing man on one side and zone on another side. Jalen Ramsey is going to be locked up with Allen Robinson all day, all Monday night. So you got to be able to run some motion with guys like Anthony Miller if you run the right route, Darnell Mooney, and maybe get some action out the backfield. That's going to be a key for the Bears winning this game as far as offensively against the Rams.
That's a great point. Hey, did anybody have any closing remarks before we close out